You feel the ship shudder around you as reality tears itself apart in the deep void between stars. The Endurance groans under stresses that shouldn't exist, her hull plate screaming as something vast and malevolent presses against the Gellar fields. Through the observation ports, you watch the warp writhe with colors that have no names, while behind you, the desperate prayers of tech marines blend with the sound of retching and the low, persistent buzz of flies. You turn as heavy footsteps approach through the corridor behind you. The figure that emerges from the shadows was once a proud Astartes of the 14th Legion, but now something else wears his armor. Brother Sergeant Voss moves with the deliberate care of someone whose body no longer obeys natural laws. His voice cold, a wet whisper that seems to bubble up from depths no throat should contain.
You want to understand what happened here? You want to know how the Emperor's most resilient sons became vectors of corruption itself? Then witness what I witnessed. Feel what I felt when Grandfather Nurgle first opened his arms to embrace us in the deep dark.
You step back instinctively as the corrupted Marine approaches, but you cannot escape the story he carries like a plague. Through the ship's Vox system, another voice crackles to life, cleaner, more human, but carrying the weight of terrible memories.
I was there too, Observer. I watched it all unfold from the beginning. You think you understand corruption. You think you know what it means to watch noble warriors transformed into walking nightmares. You know nothing yet. But you will learn as I learned, that sometimes salvation becomes the greatest trap of all.
The ship lurches again and you grab a support stanchion as the lights flicker. In the strobing illumination, you catch glimpses of things that shouldn't be. Shadows that move independently of their sources. Moisture on the walls that glistens with unnatural phosphorescence. And always the sound of flies. From the shadows steps another figure, Captain Garrow, one of the few Death Guard who escaped corruption and found redemption in service to the Emperor.
Some of us fought. Some of us fled. Some of us remained true, even as our Gene Father knelt before the altar of corruption. You want to understand the Death Guard? Then understand this. We were not conquered. We were saved. And that salvation damned us more completely than any defeat ever could.
You realize you're not just witnessing a historical account. You're experiencing the echo of events that shaped the galaxy itself, feeling the weight of choices that condemned millions to fates worse than death. The corruption here is more than physical. It seeps into the very fabric of reality, making every breath a struggle against despair. Through the observation port you watch as the ghost fleet of the Death Guard drifts through currents of pure malevolence. These ships were once the pride of the 14 Legion, but now they leak corruption into the void itself. You understand, with growing horror, that you're about to learn how the most enduring of the Emperor's sons became harbingers of humanity's destruction. The story begins not with corruption, but with honor, and that makes what follows so much worse. You find yourself standing on the training grounds of old Albia, Terra itself, in the early days of the Great Crusade. The air tastes of chemical residue and atomic winter, but the warriors around you breathe it as easily as others might breathe mountain air. These are the Dusk Raiders, the 14th Legion before they knew their father's name, before they understood what they would become. You watch as squads move through combat drills in the perpetual twilight that gives them their name. Their armor is storm gray, with the crimson hand of the Emperor blazoned proudly on their shoulders. When they speak, their voices carry the quiet pride of survivors who have earned their place through endurance rather than glory. You follow ancient Korra through the fortress monastery, its corridors echoing with the sounds of preparation for war. The grizzled veteran's voice carries the weight of centuries, for he is one of the few remaining Dusk Raiders who remembers the Legion before they found their gene father, before they became the Death Guard. Through archaic viewports you see the wastelands of Albia stretching to the horizon, a poisoned landscape that bred poisoned men, though they didn't know it yet.
You see us as we were, stranger. Before the Pale King found us, before the bitter harvest of betrayal, we were the voice and the clarion call. We were tyrants' ruin and rivals' fall. That was our battle cry in those days, and we meant every word.
You want to understand what we lost? Look around you. We were honorable then. We respected truces, accepted surrenders, fought with what the Chronicles called quiet, stubborn pride. We were the Emperor's orphans, but we were proud orphans who had earned our place in his grand design.
You observe Astartes who move with purpose, but without the desperate edge that would later define their legion. They joke with one another between training sessions, argue strategy with the passion of those who believe their cause is just. When they look to the stars, they see worlds waiting to be liberated rather than populations to be harvested.
I've studied the old records, walked through these same halls when they still echoed with laughter instead of screams. The Dusk Raiders were known for their resilience, yes, but also for their humanity. They could endure what would kill other legions, but they never forgot why that endurance mattered.
You witness training exercises where Astartes learn to fight in toxic environments, their enhanced physiology allowing them to operate in conditions that would kill normal humans within minutes. It's this very resilience that will later make them perfect vessels for corruption. Their bodies too strong to die, too stubborn to surrender even to pain beyond imagining.
We called it Ironside Heritage, the ability to endure whatever the galaxy threw at us. Our recruitment came from the survivors of Albia's worst regions, men who had breathed poison since birth and called it air. We thought it made us stronger. We thought it made us special.
The irony cuts deep as you watch these noble warriors prepare for campaigns they will never see. Their fleet moves constantly from one war zone to the next, never pausing except to make war, never resting except to plan the next liberation. They are the Emperor's unbroken blades, and they wear that title like a badge of honor. But even now, in these moments of triumph, you can sense something waiting in the deep dark between stars. The very resilience that makes them heroes contains the seeds of their damnation. Their ability to endure will become their curse. Their strength will become their weakness, and their loyalty will become the chain that drags them into the abyss. You watch them and want to warn them, but you know it would do no good. The pattern is already set. The choice is already made. All you can do is witness what they were before they became what they are now, and understand that sometimes the greatest tragedies begin with the noblest intentions. You materialize on the poisoned surface of Barbarius as the Emperor's golden ship descends through mists that would kill an unprotected human in seconds. Around you, the landscape writhes with chemical fog and industrial pollution, while in the distance, the fortresses of the Xenos overlords loom like tumors against the sickly sky. You watch as a figure emerges from the toxic wastes, tall beyond human norm, pale as bleached bone, moving with the predatory grace of something that has never known fear. This is Mortarion, the Pale King, and even now you can sense the bitter resentment that will eventually damn his soul and the souls of all who follow him.
I was not yet born when the Emperor found our Gene Father. But every warrior of Barbarus knew the tale by heart. You see him there, triumphant in his rebellion against the overlords. Look closer, see the rage in his eyes, the hatred that goes deeper than mere war. He has spent his life fighting monsters, and it has made him monstrous in return.
You witness Mortarion's first meeting with his sons, the Dusk Raiders who have come to serve a father they have never known. The transformation begins immediately. Storm grey gives way to ivory white. Crimson hands are replaced by dark green trim, and the proud traditions of old Albia begin their slow dissolution into something else entirely.
See how eagerly we embraced him. See how quickly we abandoned everything we had been for the promise of belonging to something greater. We thought we were gaining a father. We never realized we were losing ourselves.
You walk among the newly designated Death Guard as they adapt to their Primarch's vision. Barbarian recruits arrive in increasing numbers, bringing with them stories of toxic overlords and chemical warfare that make the Albion veterans seem almost naive by comparison. The Legion's character begins to shift, becoming harder, more bitter, more accepting grim of methods that would have horrified the old Dusk Raiders.
The integration was never smooth. Terran-born veterans maintained their old traditions, while barbarian newcomers brought their own culture of endurance through suffering. Two philosophies of war began to emerge within the same Legion, one that saw duty as service to humanity, another that saw it as survival against impossible odds.
You observe Mortarion as he organizes his Legion into 7 great companies, the number carrying significance that won't become clear until much later. Each company becomes a brotherhood united not just by gene seed, but by shared purpose and grim determination. Yet even now, you can sense the seeds of division being planted.
We developed new tactics under the Pale King's guidance. The reaping, we called it. A slow, methodical advance that carved through enemy lines like a scythe through grain. Our enemies learned to fear the sight of ivory-white armor advancing through smoke and flame. But we learned to take pride in being feared.
You watch as the Death Guard earn their reputation for fighting in environments that would kill other Astartes. Toxic storms, irradiated wastelands, the poisoned aftermath of virus bombings. They thrive where others would merely survive. It's a source of pride that will eventually become a source of corruption.
Even then, the pattern was being woven. 7 companies, 7 plagues, 7 gifts from Grandfather Nurgle. The number called to us, though we didn't understand why. We thought it was Mortarion's choice. We never realized it was destiny.
You stand witness as a Legion transforms from liberators into something harder and more pragmatic. The Death Guard become specialists in wars of attrition, masters of campaigns where victory goes to whoever can endure the longest. They are still loyal, still honorable, but they are no longer quite human in the way they once were. The final transformation awaits, but already you can see how the pieces are falling into place. Mortarion's resentment toward authority, the Legion's growing isolation from their imperial cousins, the slow accumulation of bitterness that will eventually provide fertile ground for corruption to take root. You witness the moment when the 14th Legion truly becomes the Death Guard, and you understand that while they gained a father and a new identity, they lost something precious that they will never be able to reclaim. You find yourself aboard the battle barge, Endurance, during the height of the Great Crusade, walking corridors that still echo with camaraderie and shared purpose. But even here, in these moments of triumph, you can sense the poison beginning to seep through the Legion's veins. It comes not from outside, but from within, from a warrior whose very existence represents everything the Death Guard will become. You observe Kalis Typhon as he moves through the ship's command sections with the easy confidence of natural leadership. First captain of the Death Guard, tactical genius, and harbinger of doom, though none who serve with him yet understand the last title. When he speaks, his voice carries conviction that could move mountains, but you sense something else beneath the surface.
Typhon was brilliant. I'll grant him that. You watch him coordinate our fleet movements. See how naturally command comes to him. But there was always something wrong. Even before we learned of his psychic abilities, there was a darkness that seemed to follow in his wake.
You witness private meetings between Typhon and visiting word-bearers, their chaplain Erebus speaking in hushed tones about warrior lodges and hidden truths. You watch as seeds of doubt are planted with surgical precision, each conversation designed to erode faith in the Emperor's vision while building loyalty to darker alternatives.
Beautiful, wasn't it? The way Erebus worked, the way Typhon embraced what was offered. They told us we were being freed from ignorance, shown truths that lesser minds couldn't comprehend. And we believed them, because we wanted to believe them.
You move through the ship's lower decks where these warrior lodges gather in secret, watching as Death Guard warriors from Barbarous find receptive ears for their grievances against Imperial authority. The divide between Terran veterans and Barbaran recruits becomes a weapon in Typhon's hands. Each group's legitimate concerns twisted into justification for rebellion.
The transformation was gradual, but inexorable. I documented every stage, thinking I was recording the natural evolution of a Legion's culture. I never realized I was witnessing the orchestrated corruption of everything they had once stood for.
You observe Mortarion during this period, seeing how his own resentments make him the perfect target for manipulation. His hatred of psychers, his distrust of authority, his conviction that he understands survival better than his distant father, all of it becomes ammunition in Typhon's campaign to turn the Death Guard against their oaths.
The Council of Decay was where it all came together. You should have seen Mortarion speak against the use of psychic powers. The warp is poison, he told the assembled Primarchs. The irony of those words would become apparent only years later, when poison became our salvation and our damnation.
You witness the moment when Horus reveals his treachery, watching as carefully laid plans activate throughout the Death Guard fleet. The virus bombing of Istvan III unfolds before your eyes, but you're observing from the perspective of those who thought they were purging traitors when they were actually purging loyalists.
The virus bombing was just the beginning. Typhon needed to purge the loyalists before the real work could begin. Those of us who embraced the truth were spared, while the blind fools who clung to the Emperor's lies were burned from orbit.
You watch Captain Garrow's desperate escape aboard the Eisenstein, seeing firsthand the horror that unfolds when the ship becomes trapped in the warp. Ignatius Grulgor returns from death as something new and terrible, the first Plague Marine, though none yet understand what they're witnessing.
The battle aboard the Eisenstein was brief, but horrifying. You see Grulgor's resurrected form, commanding other Death Guard, who had been transformed by some unknown plague. They moved with supernatural resilience, shrugging off wounds that should have felled even Astartes. It was our first glimpse of what we would all become.
You experience the growing divide within the Legion as Typhon's influence spreads. Warrior after warrior begins to question their loyalty to the Emperor, while embracing darker alternatives. The corruption is subtle at first, philosophical rather than physical, but you can sense it building towards something catastrophic.
I tried to document everything, thinking future generations would need to understand how such nobility could be perverted. But there comes a point where witnessing becomes complicity, where recording atrocity becomes participation in it. I crossed that line somewhere in the deep dark between stars.
You stand at the crossroads where brotherhood becomes betrayal, where loyalty becomes corruption, where the most enduring of the Emperor's sons take their first steps on the path to damnation. The worst part is understanding that they believe they're being saved, that they see their corruption as liberation from the lies that have defined their existence. The true horror hasn't begun yet, but you can feel it gathering like a storm that will sweep away everything these warriors once were, and replace it with something that should not exist. You stand on the bridge of the Endurance as the Death Guard fleet prepares for its final journey to Terra. But you already know this voyage will take a very different path than anyone expects. Around you, officers plot courses and calculate supply requirements for a siege that will never come, while in the shadows, Typhon weaves the web that will trap them all. You watch as navigators throughout the fleet receive orders that doom them to execution. Typhon moves with calculated precision, using his authority as first captain to eliminate every soul capable of guiding the ships through the warp safely. His justification is perfect, his paranoia seemingly justified. These navigators are agents of Malkador, sent to sabotage the Death Guard's glorious advance.
I learned of this only years later, when the Grey Knights recovered fragments of the Endurance's logs. You want to understand betrayal? Watch this. Typhon doesn't just kill the navigators. He convinces Mortarion to thank him for it.
You observe Mortarion's fury when he discovers what Typhon has done. But by then, it's too late. The fleet is stranded without guidance, drifting helplessly in the currents of space. It's exactly what Typhon planned, exactly what he needed to implement the next phase of his betrayal.
The beauty of it was that Mortarion wanted to believe Typhon's explanations. Our father's paranoia made him the perfect mark for manipulation. He saw treachery everywhere except in the place it actually existed.
You witness Typhon's revelation of his solution. He can guide the fleet using psychic abilities he has hidden for decades. For a Primarch who despises sorcery above all else, the irony is bitter beyond measure. Yet Mortarion has no choice but to accept help from cold, the very powers he has spent his life opposing.
I was there when Mortarion gave his consent. Fearful, I have no choice but to trust you, my son. But if you fail us, I will kill you, myself. Such prophetic words, though not in the way any of us expected.
You feel the ship lurch as Typhon begins his navigation, guiding the fleet not toward Terra, but into regions of the warp that have been prepared specifically to trap them. The journey that should take weeks stretches into months as the ships drift deeper into psychic mazes from which, threatening, there can be no escape without permission from powers that should not be named. You experience the first signs that something is wrong. The atmospheric processes malfunctioning, the air growing thick and humid with a cloying sweetness that sticks in the throat. Tech adepts report that all systems are functioning perfectly, yet somehow, grim, the very air itself is becoming corrupt.
That was when the first flies appeared. Beautiful things, really. Fat and glistening, with wings that caught the light like stained glass. We thought they were some kind of warp-spawned vermin at first. We had no idea they were gifts.
You watch the flies multiply with supernatural speed, filling every corridor, every chamber, every sealed compartment throughout the fleet. Where they land, where they bite, something fundamental changes in the victims. You witness the beginning of the Destroyer Plague as it claims its first victims among the mortal crew.
The astropaths were the first to understand the true danger. They reported sensing a vast, malevolent presence watching the fleet. Something ancient and patient that had been waiting for this moment for millennia. Something that loved them with a love deeper than any human emotion.
You experience the horror as the plague spreads through the fleet. Warriors who had stood unflinching before demon princes collapse in agony as corruption takes hold. Their legendary resilience becomes their curse. They cannot die, only suffer, their bodies too strong to grant them the mercy of death.
I watched from the observation deck as entire companies writhed in agony that should have killed them within hours. But death wouldn't come. Their enhanced physiology, the very modifications that made them superhuman, now trapped them in bodies that could endure any torment except the mercy of extinction.
You witness Mortarion's growing desperation as he searches for cures that don't exist, tries treatments that only make the suffering worse. His greatest strength, his ability to endure toxins that would kill others, means that he suffers longest of all, experiencing every stage of the plague's progression in agonizing detail.
And through it all, Typhon grew stronger. While we writhed in agony, he seemed to thrive on the corruption, the first to recover, the first to embrace Grandfather Nurgle's gifts, the first to understand what we were all becoming.
You stand witness as the greatest deception in human history unfolds around you. A fleet that departed as loyal servants of the Emperor drifts helplessly toward damnation, their cries for mercy echoing through the warp to ears that hear suffering as prayer. The transformation has begun, and there is no power in the galaxy that can stop what comes next. You realize you're not just observing corruption, you're experiencing it secondhand, feeling the weight of despair that drove even superhuman warriors to embrace damnation rather than endure another moment of agony. And that makes what follows so much more terrible to witness. You stand in the stratagem of the Endurance as Mortarion finally uncovers the full scope of Typhon's betrayal. Around you, the ship groans under the weight of supernatural corruption while plague-racked Astartes collapse at their stations. The air itself has become toxic, thick with the buzz of demon flies and the sweet stench of decay. But none of that matters now. Only the confrontation between father and son that will damn them all. You watch Mortarion's face as he reviews the evidence, hidden chambers filled with chaos artifacts, communication logs showing years of contact with warp entities, detailed plans for the Legion's transformation written in Typhon's own hand. The betrayal cuts deeper than any physical wound, because it comes from the one person Mortarion trusted absolutely.
I was present when the confrontation began. Mortarion's rage was terrible to behold. Not the hot fury of battle, but the cold, implacable anger of someone whose most fundamental beliefs have been shattered. The betrayal had cut him deeper than any poison ever could.
You feel the ship shudder as Mortarion's wrath manifests physically, his psychic pressure cracking bulkheads and making servitors malfunction. When he speaks, his voice carries the authority of someone who has never been denied, never been defeated, never been outmaneuvered by a mere mortal.
You have damned us all, Mortarion said, his voice barely above a whisper. Everything I fought for, everything I built, you have sold it all to the very powers I swore to oppose. You should have seen Typhon's response. The bastard actually smiled.
You witness the duel that follows. Primarch against first captain. Father against son. Loyalty against corruption. Mortarion is weakened by the plague, but still superhuman. His scythes silence carving arcs of death through the air. Typhon defends himself with psychic powers he has hidden for decades. His body beginning to shift and change as warp energy flows through him.
And Typhon laughed. Even as our father's accusations rang through the chamber, even as that great scythe descended toward his neck, Typhon threw back his head and laughed with pure joy. That was when we all knew the truth.
You watch Mortarion strike the killing blow. Silence cleaving through Typhon's power armor and deep into his chest. Any normal being would have died instantly, but Typhon only smiles as the blade pierces his heart. Death holds no terror for the chosen of Nurgle. You witness Mortarion's desperate gambit as he resurrects Ignatius Grulgor from the ship's deepest dungeons. The demon-possessed former captain moves to obey his Primarch's command, massive hands closing around Typhon's throat. For a moment it seems the rebellion might be crushed through sheer will.
Then both corpses began to laugh. Typhon's body convulsed and sat upright, even as Grulgor's laughter echoed through the chamber. That was when Mortarion truly understood the depth of his defeat. Death was not punishment for these beings. It was transformation. The final straw came when young Raheb Zuriek crawled into the Strategium, begging for mercy. Half his face had been consumed by the plague, and flies were nesting in the exposed bone. But he still lived, still suffered, unable to die. Mortarion tried to grant him peace with a swift blade stroke, but the wound closed instantly.
You witness the moment when Mortarion's spirit finally shatters. Falling to his knees before the altar of his own failures, he speaks the words that damn his legion forever. I pledge myself and my sons to your service, Lord of Decay. Only grant them peace.
The relief was indescribable. One moment I was drowning in agony, every nerve screaming, every breath a knife in my lungs. The next, blessed numbness flooded through my body. Not health, we were beyond such simple concepts, but freedom from pain.
You feel the corruption flow through the ship like a tide of malevolent mercy, transforming everything it touches. Warriors who had been dying in agony suddenly find relief, their suffering replaced by something that feels like salvation. They don't understand that they've traded temporary pain for eternal damnation. You stand witness as a Primarch's love for his sons becomes the instrument of their destruction, as mercy becomes corruption, as salvation becomes the greatest trap of all. The Death Guard are no longer dying. They are being reborn into something that should not exist, and they embrace it with the gratitude of the truly desperate. The transformation has begun, and there is no power in the galaxy that can stop what comes next. You feel the change begin in your own borrowed flesh, as Mortarion's surrender echoes through the warp itself. The ship around you transforms, bulkheads weeping with organic secretions, while the very air becomes thick with spores and corruption. You experience the metamorphosis not as an observer, but as a participant, feeling what every Death Guard felt as they were reborn, into something beyond human understanding. The relief comes first, blessed numbness flooding through systems that had been screaming with agony for weeks. You understand now why they welcomed it, why even the strongest warriors in the galaxy embraced corruption rather than endure another moment of suffering. The pain doesn't disappear entirely, but it transforms into something bearable, something that can be endured forever.
You feel it now, don't you? The weight lifting from every nerve ending, the burning in your lungs subsiding to a gentle warmth. This is what salvation feels like when it comes from a god who truly loves his children.
You watch your borrowed form begin to change, flesh swelling and shifting as supernatural resilience replaces merely human durability. Wounds that would have been fatal become minor inconveniences. Pain that would have driven you mad becomes just another sensation to be catalogued and endured. You are becoming something that can survive anything the galaxy might inflict.
I have spoken with survivors of that transformation. Those few Death Guard who later sought redemption through service to the Death Watch. They describe it as the most seductive trap imaginable. Suffering so intense that any relief seems like divine intervention.
You experience the physical changes as they ripple through your borrowed form. Organs relocate and multiply, creating redundancies that make death nearly impossible. Your skin thickens and discolors, taking on the pallid hue that will mark you forever as one of Nurgle's chosen. Most disturbing of all, you find yourself grateful for these changes.
The psychological transformation was perhaps even more profound than the physical. I watched warriors who had once fought to liberate humanity from oppression embrace their role as harbingers of that same oppression. They convinced themselves they were spreading love to an ungrateful galaxy.
You feel your perception shift as the corruption takes hold. What once seemed like decay now appears as natural beauty. The buzzing of flies becomes a soothing melody. The stench of rot transforms into the perfume of renewal. You understand, with growing horror, that this is how they justify what they've become.
The clarity was overwhelming. The Emperor's lies fell away like scales from our eyes, and we saw the galaxy as it truly was. A place of endless suffering that could only be healed through Grandfather Nurgle's gifts. How could we keep such blessings to ourselves?
You witness other Death Guard undergoing the same transformation, each at his own pace. Some embrace the changes immediately, reveling in their new resilience and purpose. Others fight against the corruption until the very end, their resistance only making their eventual mutation more extreme and horrible.
Those who resisted longest often became the most horrifically mutated. Nurgle's gifts cannot be denied, only delayed, and the delay simply allowed the corruption to express itself in more creative ways. Some became walking hives of insects. Others transformed into living clouds of disease.
You feel your weapons changing as well. Your bolter beginning to fire rounds infused with demon essence. Each shell carries plagues that could spread through entire hive cities, while your blades weep with toxins that can corrupt a man's soul with a single cut. You are becoming a living weapon of mass destruction.
The most disturbing aspect was how they retained their memories and personalities. These weren't mindless plague zombies. They were the same tactical geniuses, the same veteran warriors, now devoted to spreading corruption instead of fighting it.
You experience the strategic planning sessions as the transformed Death Guard adapt to their new nature. They catalog the diseases flowing through their systems with the same pride they once reserved for battle honors. They plan campaigns not for conquest, but for the systematic spread of corruption across the galaxy.
We were ready at last to bring Grandfather's love to Terra. The Emperor who had stolen our father's victory, who had built an empire on lies and oppression, he would learn the true meaning of sacrifice.
You feel the fleet finally break free from the warp, emerging into real space near Terra, just as the siege reaches its climax. But you're too late. The delay in the warp has cost the Death Guard their chance to participate in the war's opening phases. The irony is lost on none who witness it.
The Legion that had once been known for their reliability, their ability to arrive exactly when and where needed, had been rendered irrelevant by their own corruption. Yet even in their reduced role, they made their presence felt on the battlefields of Terra.
You participate in the final assaults on the Imperial Palace, spreading plagues through the defending forces and turning the very battlefield into a toxic wasteland. The Lion's Gate spaceport falls to your advance while the Saturnine wall crumbles before your brother's blessed touch.
We fought with the tactical brilliance we had always possessed, but now it was directed toward the systematic corruption of everything we touched. Defensive positions became plague laboratories. Captured weapons became vectors for disease.
You experience the bitter end as Horus falls and the siege collapses. The Death Guard are among the last to retreat, lingering in the ruins they have created to seed them with corruption that will fester for centuries to come. You understand that this is not defeat, but preparation for a longer war. As the great scouring begins and the traitor legions retreat to the Eye of Terra, you feel the bonds that hold the Death Guard together, not mere loyalty, but shared corruption, the same blessed diseases flowing through every warrior's veins. You are bound together by more than brotherhood now.
Unity through corruption. We were bound together by more than mere loyalty. We shared the same blessed diseases, the same divine purpose. How could we fragment when we were all part of the same glorious infection?
You understand, with growing horror and acceptance, that you have become part of something that transcends normal human comprehension. The Death Guard are no longer just warriors. They are living embodiments of entropy itself, decay given purpose and direction. And worst of all, you understand why they embrace it so completely. The transformation is complete and there is no going back. You stand in the command chamber of a plague ship, 10,000 years after the Heresy, watching as the Death Guard coordinate campaigns across the galaxy with efficiency that would impress even the most rigid Imperial strategist. Around you, the walls pulse with organic growth, while tactical displays show slow but inexorable spread of corruption through dozens of star systems. You understand now how a single corrupted legion became a galaxy-spanning threat. Through your enhanced senses, you feel the connections that bind every Death Guard warband across the stars. Unlike other traitor legions that fragmented into countless feuding factions, the Death Guard maintain remarkable unity through shared corruption. Each plague marine carries diseases that link him to his brothers, creating a network of biological communication that transcends normal military hierarchy.
We are unified by love, Observer. Grandfather Nurgle's love flows through us all, connecting us across the vastness of space. A plague marine on the eastern fringe shares his diseases with his brothers in the Eye of Terra, through bonds that transcend mere communication.
You observe the 7 great companies as they coordinate operations with supernatural precision. Each company has developed its own specialization over the millennia. The first, under Typhus, commands vast plague fleets. The second excels at grinding siege warfare. The third holds ground with defensive positions that can last centuries.
The reports from the Death Watch paint a disturbing picture, where other Chaos Legions tear themselves apart in internal conflicts. The Death Guard grows stronger with each passing century. Their unity isn't based on fear or ambition. It's biological, inevitable.
You witness communications between Typhus and Mortarion, feeling the tension that has grown between them over the millennia. The Herald of Nurgle operates with near-complete independence from his flagship, the Terminus Est, conducting campaigns that spread corruption to every corner of the galaxy, while his Gene Father broods on his demon world.
The organizational structure they maintain is fascinating from a military perspective. 7 great companies, just as in their pre-corruption days, each specializing in different aspects of biological warfare. But now their tactics incorporate supernatural elements that make conventional defense impossible.
You experience the planning sessions for major campaigns, watching as Plague Marines and Demon engines work together to develop new strains of disease. The 7th Company's laboratories produce plagues so virulent they could sterilize entire systems, while other companies focus on corruption that spreads through technological networks or psychic connections.
The crawling pestilence, the sanguous flux, the gloaming bloat. Each company carries its own blessed strains, refined over millennia of careful cultivation. We are living libraries of corruption, preserving diseases that would otherwise be lost to time.
You witness the return of Gilliman and the opening of the Great Rift, events that provide new opportunities for Death Guard expansion. The Scourge stars become a permanent base of operations, while the galaxy-spanning warp storm allows corruption to spread faster than ever before.
Their most recent campaign, the Plague Wars in Ultramar, demonstrated how dangerous they've become. Gilliman himself was nearly killed by the godblight plague that Mortarion unleashed. Only divine intervention saved the Avenging Sun from sharing our fate.
You participate in the complex biological warfare strategies that define modern Death Guard tactics. No longer content with simple conquest, they employ calculated approaches designed to corrupt entire populations over time. Each attack is precisely calibrated to maximize infection rates while minimizing Imperial ability to contain outbreaks.
The War of Flies phase saw daily attacks by plague zombies, not to conquer territory, but to spread specific diseases through defending populations. Each assault was mathematically calculated to create maximum epidemiological impact.
The psychological warfare component operates on a systemic level across every theater. Death Guard forces deliberately target medical facilities, clean water supplies, and food distribution networks. Humanity's compassion becomes a weapon, as every act of mercy transforms into cold, a vector for corruption. Kindness itself becomes the enemy.
Every fallen defender becomes a new vector for our gifts, threatening. Their own medical facilities become breeding grounds for blessed corruption. The harder they fight against us, the more completely they are consumed.
New forms of corruption emerge specifically designed to counter Imperial technologies. The Nemesis worm that infected Forge World Metallica was a plague that targeted cogitator systems and data networks, proving that even machine spirits are not immune, grim, to Nurgle's gifts. No sanctuary remains unviolated.
Recent intelligence suggests they're developing corruption that can spread through Vox transmissions, administrative data streams, even Imperial religious iconography. Cold, they're weaponizing the very infrastructure that holds Imperial civilization together.
Campaign planning sessions stretch across centuries. Death Guard strategists coordinating with other Chaos forces while maintaining their own objectives. The patience they display transcends human comprehension. Plans unfold across millennia, corruption seeded, threatening. that will mature long after current Imperial leaders are dust. Immortality grants the luxury of perfect patience.
We are the inevitable future of this galaxy. Every world will eventually join Grandfather's garden. Every soul will know his love. We are patient. We have eternity to complete our great work.
The command chamber reveals the operation of humanity's most successful military organization. The Death Guard have achieved everything the Emperor dreamed of. Unity of purpose, technological superiority, unshakable loyalty, and absolute dedication to their cause. The fact that their cause is the systematic corruption of all life only makes their success more terrifying. Tactical displays show new outbreaks spreading across Imperial space like a slow infection. The Death Guard represent more than just another chaos threat. They embody the corruption of everything humanity once aspired to become, proving that even the noblest virtues can be perverted into instruments of damnation. The war continues, and across every front they are winning it one soul at a time. A massive mirror dominates the chamber before you, but its surface reflects not physical forms, but the philosophical choices that brought the Death Guard to this point. Around you, echoes fill the air, decisions made in desperation, each one seeming reasonable at the time, but contributing to a cascade of corruption that consumed an entire legion. The ultimate tragedy of false salvation plays out in endless reflection. Captain Garrow approaches from the shadows, one of the few Death Guard who escaped corruption and found redemption through service to the Emperor's truth. His words carry the weight of someone who has walked both paths and paid the price for understanding each choice.
In my years serving with the Grey Knights, I've encountered many former Death Guard who sought redemption. Without exception, they described their initial transformation as a relief so profound, it felt like resurrection itself. That's the trap, Observer. Corruption presents itself as salvation.
Borrowed memories flood the chamber. The agony aboard plague ships while relief seemed impossible. The destroyer plague created suffering so intense that any alternative felt like divine intervention. When numbness finally came, when pain subsided into manageable sensation, it seemed like the answer to prayer. The trap was perfect because it offered exactly what was needed.
Oh, it was resurrection. We died in agony aboard those plague ships and were reborn into something greater. The pain that had consumed us was replaced by purpose, clarity, and the unshakable knowledge that we were loved by a God who understood suffering.
The mechanisms become clear with horrifying precision. Nurgle presents his corruption not as damnation, but as rescue, not as disease, but as immunity to suffering. His victims collaborate in their own downfall, because they genuinely believe they're being saved. From a fate worse than corruption. The deception is so complete, it becomes truth in their minds.
The theological implications are staggering. If Nurgle can present damnation as salvation convincingly enough that even superhuman warriors embrace it willingly, what hope do ordinary humans have of recognizing such sophisticated deception?
The mirror shows worlds that have been liberated by Death Guard forces. Populations genuinely grateful to their plague marine saviors. Mysterious famines and plagues preceded their arrival, creating desperation that made any relief seem miraculous. Only later do the survivors realize they've traded temporary suffering for eternal corruption. The gratitude in their eyes makes it worse.
I remember fighting alongside Death Guard Marines during the Great Crusade. They had moments of genuine camaraderie, pride in their achievements, grief for fallen brothers. The Plague Marines retain memories of these emotions, but not their substance. They remember what joy felt like, but can no longer feel it.
The central horror becomes apparent. These are philosophical zombies, beings that remember emotions, but can no longer experience them authentically. Their joy in corruption is merely the absence of their former suffering, not genuine happiness or satisfaction. They are hollow shells, wearing the faces of heroes. The cosmic irony that defines the Death Guard's existence becomes clear. They fell because they could not accept that some suffering serves a purpose, that meaningful growth requires the willingness to endure temporary pain. Their rejection of this principle has trapped them in eternal stagnation, disguised as transcendence. Progress died with their acceptance.
You romanticize suffering, Observer. There is no nobility in pain, no virtue in hardship. We have found a better way. The way of acceptance. Unity with the natural order of decay and renewal that governs all existence.
The lie at the heart of Nurgle's offer becomes visible in the mirror's depths. His renewal is merely the creation of new forms of corruption. Nothing genuinely new or beautiful emerges from his domain. Only endlessly recycled variations on the theme of decay without meaningful transformation. The garden is beautiful only to those who have forgotten what flowers truly look like.
Yet hope remains. Even now, there are Death Guard who recognize the lie they've been living and seek redemption. The Death Watch has protocols for accepting such penitence, though the process is difficult and not always successful.
The mirror reveals these penitent plague marines. Warriors who have somehow broken free from Nurgle's psychological conditioning and seek to undo the damage they've caused. Their redemption is painful, often fatal, but it proves that even the most complete corruption isn't absolutely permanent. Free will, buried deep, still flickers like a candle in the dark.
false hope. Those who abandon grandfather's love find only greater suffering. Without our blessed immunity, they are consumed by the very diseases they once carried. Their redemption is just another form of death.
Free will, though weakened and constrained, has not been entirely destroyed. The existence of penitent Death Guard proves that choice still exists, buried beneath layers of corruption, but not completely eliminated. This alone provides reason determined to continue fighting against the spread of Nurgle's influence. The war is not yet lost.
The Death Guard represent more than just another chaos threat. They embody the seductive lie that suffering can be ended through surrender, rather than overcome through strength. As long as humans suffer, as long as they seek easy solutions to difficult problems, Nurgle's servants will find new recruits.
The mirror's surface shows both what they became and what anyone might become under similar circumstances. The Death Guard's story serves as both warning and challenge. They show what humanity becomes when it chooses comfort over growth, when it accepts corruption disguised as salvation. Yet they also prove that even the most complete damnation can sometimes be overcome hopeful by those with sufficient courage to choose suffering over false peace. The mirror reflects not just their transformation grim, but the recognition that under the right circumstances, anyone might make the same choice. And that understanding is perhaps the most important lesson of all. The eye of Terra itself surrounds you, reality bending according to Nurgle's will, as Death Guard fleets prepare for another campaign of systematic corruption. Plague Marines make final preparations for assaults that will spread disease across entire star systems. This is not just war. It is the slow transformation of the galaxy itself into something that mirrors their corrupted souls. Through the observation ports, new Death Guard vessels emerge from shipyards that exist partially in real space and partially in Nurgle's garden. These ships grow rather than being built, their hulls incorporating living tissue that can repair damage and adapt to new threats. Technology and corruption have achieved the ultimate fusion, while maintaining the pretense of improvement.
Every ship, every weapon, every warrior, all of it grows stronger with each passing century. We don't just maintain our forces, we cultivate them like a gardener tends his crops. And our harvest is the galaxy itself.
strategic planning sessions unfold, where Death Guard commanders coordinate with other Chaos forces while maintaining their own objectives. The patience they display transcends human comprehension. Campaigns planned across millennia, corruption seeded that will mature long after current imperial leaders are dust. Immortality grants the luxury of perfect timing.
The psychological warfare never ends. Even now, as you witness their preparations, part of you wonders if they might be right, if their path truly offers relief from the suffering that defines human existence. The doubt itself is Nurgle's greatest weapon.
The influence works subtly on consciousness itself. The pressure that makes corruption seem reasonable, inevitable, even merciful. Entire populations can be turned not through force, but through the simple promise that their suffering can end if they just stop fighting against forces greater than themselves. The seduction is always gentle, always loving.
The Death Guard's greatest victory isn't any world they've conquered or army they've destroyed. It's the doubt they plant in the minds of those who hear their story. The whisper that maybe, just maybe, they've found a better way than endless struggle against impossible odds.
New Plague Marines arrive for induction into the Legion. Not just corrupted Imperial forces, but volunteers who have seen what the Death Guard offer and chosen to embrace it willingly. These aren't broken souls seeking escape from pain. They're rational beings who have concluded that corruption offers advantages that loyalty cannot match. The most dangerous converts are those who choose damnation with open eyes.
They come to us not in desperation, but in hope. They see worlds where our gifts have ended suffering, where populations no longer fear death or disease. How can we turn away those who seek the peace we've found?
Connections span the galaxy as Death Guard cells coordinate with infected populations, corrupted officials, and sympathetic cults. The network of influence operates below Imperial detection thresholds, while systematically undermining the foundations of human civilization. A shadow empire built on willing collaboration.
The reports from the Death Watch grow more disturbing each decade. They're not just spreading disease anymore. They're spreading philosophy, converting people to their worldview before the physical corruption even begins. They're winning the war of ideas.
Planning unfolds for what they call the Final Garden, a vision of the galaxy where every world reflects Nurgle's vision of paradise through decay. Not the destruction of human civilization, but its transformation into something that serves the Plague God's will while maintaining just enough humanity to suffer meaningfully. Paradise and hell become indistinguishable.
They don't want to destroy us. They want to save us from ourselves. That's what makes them so dangerous. Enemies who seek our annihilation can be fought with conventional weapons. Enemies who offer us exactly what we think we want require different responses.
Training exercises unfold, where Death Guard practice not just warfare, but governance. Learning how to rule populations that have accepted corruption willingly. They study imperial administrative systems not to destroy them, but to replace them with alternatives that serve Nurgle's purposes, while appearing to serve human needs. The perfect totalitarian state, disguised as liberation.
Why destroy when you can improve? Why conquer when you can convince? The Emperor built his empire on force and fear. We're building something better. A civilization based on love, acceptance, and freedom from the illusions that have tormented humanity for millennia.
Communication systems carry reports from across the galaxy. Imperial worlds slowly succumbing to plagues that seem natural. Populations embracing philosophies that make them receptive to corruption. Officials making decisions that serve chaos purposes while believing they're protecting their people. The corruption spreads through willing hands.
The worst part is that some of their successes are genuine. I've seen worlds they've healed where starvation has ended, where disease no longer kills, where populations live in something resembling contentment. The cost is their souls, but many consider that a fair trade.
The Death Guard represent evolution rather than rebellion. The transformation of human civilization into something that serves different masters, while retaining enough familiar elements to seem like improvement rather than replacement. They offer solutions to real problems, making their corruption seductive rather than obviously evil. Progress disguised as preservation.
The eternal war continues, not just on battlefields, but in the realm of ideas. In the space between despair and hope, where humans make choices that define their species' future. The Death Guard have chosen their path, but the rest of humanity's fate remains undecided.
The weight of infinite possibilities stretches across eternity. Every choice made by every human in the galaxy contributes to outcomes that will echo across the centuries. The Death Guard offer one possible future for humanity. But it's not the only future, and it's not inevitable. The galaxy still burns with the light of those who refuse to surrender.
The Emperor protects, not because he shields us from all harm, but because he gives us the strength to endure whatever harm cannot be avoided. The Death Guard forgot that lesson, but it doesn't mean the rest of us must repeat their mistake.
The eternal struggle between different visions of what humanity might become plays out across the cosmos. The Death Guard's story serves as both warning and challenge. They achieved transcendence through surrender, but transcendence through struggle remains possible for those with courage to choose the harder path. The choice between comfort and growth echoes through eternity. The eternal struggle between different visions of what humanity might become plays out across the cosmos. The Death Guard story serves as both warning and challenge. They achieved transcendence through surrender, but transcendence through struggle remains possible for those with courage to choose the harder path. The choice between comfort and growth echoes through eternity.
The offer remains open, observer. When the pain becomes too great, when the struggle grows too hard, when the promises of those who claim to love you prove false, we will be waiting. We will offer what you truly desire. Rest.
The vision prepares to release its hold, but the understanding remains. The Death Guard's greatest weapon isn't biological or technological, it's philosophical. They offer answers to the fundamental questions that torment every thinking being. Why do we suffer? How can pain be overcome? What price is too high for peace? The answer to those questions will determine not just individual fate, but the fate of everyone touched by that influence. The eternal war continues, and every soul must choose which side represents their vision of what humanity should become. The choice, as always, is yours.